Had a lot of technical difficulties last night. Ended up really screwing up the stream. Hopefully, I've worked all that out. Took me a little longer to get started today. Just one of those days. So, it's open! Alright. Ooh, lots of people here right away. Cool. Hang on a sec, guys. Sorry, guys. Had to uh, had to let in Kim, Courtney's client. So, going to go through the hand reviews and then jump into the study session. So here we go. But I appreciate you guys being here so early. That is awesome. All right. Let's go ahead and start here. A7. These are in chronological order, so this is from the start of the day to the end of the day. So this tournament, I think you start out. Let's see here. Oh, this might be towards the end. Why is the blind so high? Oh no, this is one that starts at like 100K. Okay, I understand. All right, looks good. A7 in the big blind. We see a raise in the cutoff, get a call, obvious defend. We make an ace. Can be good. You know, you don't want to get too carried away. Flop comes off, player bets under standard. Standard here would be 1/3 pot, but honestly, into two players, if you had an ace and you were worried about it, you would probably bet bigger. There's really no draws to worry about here. So there is that kind of wrinkle where if the player has ace king, he may think betting looks or checking looks too trappy, so he may want to bet, and betting small can be a good idea, but we'll see what happens. So we call. Obviously, we're not giving up the ace that quick. 10 on the turn, not bad. We decide to go ahead and check again. It checks back. The ace in the river is actually really kind of fascinating because now it's far less likely that our opponent has an ace, and this is one that I think leading is more important because here's the thing. If we check and our opponent doesn't have an ace, right? Let's say he started with something like a pair, pocket nines or something, right? He could definitely c-bet the flop. He could even have something as strong as pocket queens or kings. Who knows? But we beat all that. So if he has pocket, kings, he's probably going to bet. Queens, yeah. But if you start getting into jacks, maybe not. Tens, if he has like a 10 in his hand, that's fine. He's probably not going to, or he might bet it. But if he has a pair like nines or lower, he's not going to bet. And the other thing is, too, is with a 10, what did we call him with on the flop? And a lot of players fall into that. What's going to call me anyway? So they won't bet here for value. So I didn't want to leave it up to chance and allow this player to bet or to just check behind with my set of aces. Now, let's say I had bet and he raises, I can easily fold here. It's fine, and it's an amount that I didn't have to lose. Like if I had just checked and he bet, I kind of have to call it. You know what I'm saying? So if I check and he bets, he's going to bet something like 9 or 10 blinds with an ace, and pretty much all the aces beat me. I'm going to have to call it. So in this instance, I think it's smart to just bet for standard value, which isn't quite full value. It's about 70% pot. And in that instance, we get called by the hands that we beat, and we get raised by the ones that we don't. But when we get raised, we actually saved money because if somebody has, ace queen right here, they're going to bet bigger than this 7.8, so we actually save a blind or two. And he does call, and he rolls over king 10. Perfectly kind of reasonable from his perspective, but betting that river is really important to make sure we get all the value that we're deserving. Pocket fours. It's not like our hand is so close in equities that we can check there and expect our opponent to bet for value or bluff. So we go ahead and call. Hey, deuce 10 ace, not the greatest, but it goes check check, and it is a three-way pot. And in this instance, I can have all the aces. Once these players check, it's very hard for them to have an ace, and it just goes fold. So this is one where it's just a positional advantage, and I think betting bigger is smarter because if you had an ace here, like something like ace jack or something, right? Even ace 9, you wouldn't want to let a flush card come off on the turn if you didn't have one. So I'm basically, this is what we were talking about yesterday. I'm capping my range at one pair, but that one pair is an ace. So if you don't have one, you cannot continue. A flush draw can continue, sure, but I'm going to bet the turn if a no diamond comes, and we're going to go from there. So this is a good point of capping your range by betting. All right, next one. King, queen offsuit. I think I remember this one. Yeah, player raised from the small blind. We decide to go ahead and call. Make a queen. Player checks. I check back. Kind of, we're both trapping. Ace on the turn is not great for me. Obviously, all the flushes get there, but that's not the biggest concern. The biggest concern is the ace. Player bets half pot. This doesn't really tell me anything, but I still don't want to fold yet because one bet, why would I fold? River comes off and he checks, and there's really no reason to bet for value here because he could have just, backdoor to flush. Now, I did think about, should I be bluffing here? And I wanted to see these equities. I probably should be because it's about 50-50 whether or not we win this pot. And in that case, you want to push yourself over the edge. I think betting is important. I probably don't have enough showdown value to actually just make the check here. Like, I have a bluff catcher, right? Like, if he had bet something, small, I could definitely bluff catch. But I don't think I have enough to just check and take my showdown because he's going to have an ace too often. He's going to have a club too often. And if he has, like, the 9 of clubs in his hand, it's kind of hard to call a 12 big blind bet, right? So I think I fucked this one up, in retrospect. I check it, and he does have ace-king. I think that's on the border. Maybe the way the betting played out, the fact that he bet the turn and I called, and the river came off a club. I think maybe I could have gotten a fold, but it is close because he's supposed to call a lot, and a lot of players don't know that. They just see the 4 clubs on the board and go, ah, shit. So, yeah, I think I fucked this one up. Pocket kings. We see a raise and a call. We go ahead and make it massive, 10 big blinds. And this isn't uncharacteristic, right? I mean, if we went a standard pot size bet, it would be like 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 and a half, 12 and a half, right? So 10 is under that, but it's just that there's so many blinds out here. So we see a call and a call, obviously. Queen comes off, comes off queen high, not bad. There's 30 blinds in the pot. It should be fairly easy for us to get the money in versus one pair here. I decided to go ahead and bet small because I'm looking to get the turn going. Basically, if they call here, we're going to put it all in on the turn. We see a one-player call, 4 on the turn. Spade's not great for us, but still there's really no reason to check here because I think a flush draw would have check raised. Plus, what are the possible flush draws? Ace-king suited. And here's the real great thing is that when our opponent has a hand like king-queen with the king of spades or ace-queen with the ace of spades, we get all the money in here. And yeah, he's got some outs, but he's only got 12 of them if he's got the ace-queen of spades, right? Or 14 of them. So he's got 28% going to the river, and we're playing for a very big pot. He does go ahead and call, and he just has the old queen with a jack of spades. Those odds are pretty much the same. I mean, if we look at it on the turn, our opponent has 32%. It's fine, We're going to lose a third of the time, but when we don't lose, we're going to win just a massive, massive pot. This was very early in the Boski, and it was a good one that took us a long way. But that's just the point of you don't want to freak out when you have kings, right? Like, your biggest fear should not be getting your kings cracked. Your biggest fear should be not getting all your value, right? If I don't get all the money in there on the turn, I made a mistake. That's just the truth of the matter. Let's see here. We see a raise from a big stack in the hijack, right? Yeah, cut off hijack. I decided to go ahead and defend the 9-7. Flop comes off 3 hearts. Not great, but not bad. It's a monotone board. Player bets 1.5. This is so telling, it's ridiculous. Players will meter the size of their bet. So this is what used to happen back in the early 2000s where players would do what they call a tester bet. This is also done as a throwaway continuation bet, like where they know that a lot of players will just fold if they don't have a heart in their hand. I'm not one of those. I have other skills I can use. So it goes check, check on the turn. The river's a pretty easy bet here. He hasn't invested much. the pot's much bigger. Our investment is only 3.5 into this pot, and we're getting 3-1 on what our investment was. This bet only has to work. Um, well, let's see here. It has to work about. Let's see. When he folds, we win 10, betting 7. So, what is that? It doesn't have to work very often, but it will. I can't do the math. It's too early. But it will. I think this will work 80 or 90% of the time. I think the only way we really get called is if our opponent has exactly ace king with the king of hearts. But even then, I think they're betting bigger on the flop. So maybe they have something like an ace or an 8-9 or a jack 10 with the 10 of hearts. Like there has to be something there, right? But this bet is big enough. Like if I had bet like a third pot or half pot, it's much easier for those hands to call. I like just betting big here because this is what we would do with a flush or a full house. Remember, there's a full house option too. So yeah, we just take it down. Donking into the opponent, pretty strong play on average. King queen on the button. Player raises in a semi-early position. The low jack being middle position. I decided to 3-bet because I did have a big stack in this tournament. I don't like calling the king queen. I think if I had king queen suited, I would call it more often. But I have a big stack here, and I'm pretty much trying to get it to the point where every hand I play, I want to 3-bet. Just because these players are opening too wide, folding too much, and like this can be any hand. I'm kind of discounting this guy's range because of the frequencies on this table. He does call it. Flop comes off all diamonds. We decided to just go ahead and bet 1/3 pot. This bet kind of looks fearless, but it's still very expensive for a player with only 40 blinds. So he just folds. Like this bet is a standard continuation bet, right? It's like just under, or it's just over 1/3 of the pot, right? It's like 35-40% pot, I think this is one of those instances where betting range just looks stronger than betting for protection. Like if we had aces here with the ace of diamonds, this is what we would do, right? Just pretty much fearless. King 10 offsuit. Go ahead and make a raise in the cutoff. Make flop top pair. This is so funny because just in yesterday's lesson from the tournament masterclass, Jonathan Little was talking about why you want to raise these hands in late position. And this is one of those hands that I'm going to raise, and if I got 3-bet, I would just fold, right? And you say, why do you play hands that are weak enough that they can't stand a 3-bet? Well, because of this exact hand, the way this plays out. So we flop top pair with best kicker. We're going to have the monster here 90% of the time. We decided to go ahead and bet a little bit bigger than normal. There are 2 players in the pot, but there are draws out there. So this bet plays bigger. This bet plays like 7 or 8 blinds because we're betting about 2/3 pot into multiple players. So this isn't standard. This isn't like heads up. We get called by the big stack, which is fine. He can have all the draws. And we get called by the big blind, which he's more likely to have pairs than not. So that's really what I'm targeting after. It goes check, check. And I decide just to ram all the chips in because I really believe that this big blind has a draw and the small blind has the hand. So when the small blind has the hand and the big blind has the draw, we would rather just take the pot right here or get it in versus the short stack. Now, the short stack has a 1-to-1 stack to pot ratio. So if he has a pair, I don't think he's folding. We do get the big blind out of the way, and the short stack does call. The river comes off, and it's a third 10. That's pretty awesome. And he had 8-10. This is exactly the scenario that Jonathan Little was talking about, is that when you get action with these, quote-unquote old-school trouble hands, king 10 offsuit, when you don't get 3-bet, you're dominating the range that calls you. Is he occasionally going to have ace 10? Occasionally. But most of the time, that hand's going to jam pre-flop on his stack facing 2 opponents, for a squeeze, and then we just fold. Is he going to occasionally beat me here with 10-9? Sure. He called with 10-8. He's going to call with 10-9. And, he just picked up a open-ender on the turn. Is he going to beat me sometimes in the river? Yeah. But it's not very likely, right? Like, if we look, he's in a situation where he can't fold, and once this player folds, I am 38% to win again. So, he can only hit an 8 or a 6 or a jack, right? that's it. Everything else is no good for him. So yeah, we get it in, and now the other player folds, and we're now 75% to win. So, bing. Just kind of an interesting thing to remember, and it was funny because we talked about it yesterday, and then that night playing, this situation exactly came up, and I was really happy to illustrate that. Ace King offsuit. This is the 6 Max Turbo. This tournament was kind of rough for me. I will say I like 6 Max, but to do well in that 6 Max Turbo 3K, you kind of have to play tighter than the other players and more aggressively than the other players. The other players are kind of playing it like it's a 5-handed table, and they're playing it. I mean, this is a 5-handed table, but it's supposed to be 6 Max. But they're playing it like shorter than it is, and they just know I got to be aggressive, and so their aggression disappears after the flop. So you're going to find floating a lot in this tournament works better because they're not going to be able to deal with betting the turn. You know, C betting and check raising flops is, you know, the monster way to go in this one. But anyway, see a raise out of first. I decide to 3-bet. I'm perfectly happy getting it in, but the player folds, and I think why I marked this one, if I'm not mistaken, was I wanted to run the numbers, but it really doesn't kind of matter. My chips, I didn't realize how short I was on chips in blinds. It kind of doesn't matter, so I'm just going to let this one pass us by. Ace Jack offsuit. We raised a 2.5 out of first, same table, 5-handed. Let's see here. We make the jack, yep, and we have the backdoor flush draw. So I decided to go ahead and just bet standard. We do get check raised. We see by the blind that defended. Now, the blind can have all the draws and all the best hands. My feeling was most of the time this is going to be some kind of combo draw, like maybe a pair and a flush draw, or it could be like the 5-6 of clubs, or it could even be like a really weird 2-pair. Like, but what are the 2 pairs, right? Because does 3-7 defend? No, not really. So the weird 2 pairs are like Jack 7, and that's kind of it. So when that's the case, I'm thinking I'm more up against a combo. 8-9 of clubs absolutely would check raise the flop, but let's go back to it. He checked, I bet standard, and he raised to 8 big blinds. This is kind of small. Like, I think it feels like he's trying to set the price to get to the river. So when the turn doesn't help him, right, obviously the turn's good for me. When the turn doesn't help him, he just checks. So then I check back because I honestly felt like I was so far ahead that we could have got the money in here, but I felt like I would have had to fade like a straight in flush draw. So like a club, a 6, a 10, a 4, a 5, all these cards, deuce, 8, all these cards make draws that are going to beat me, and I'm going to be able to figure it out on the river. Now, there's another wrinkle. Am I folding 2-pair here? Kind of not folding 2-pair here unless a club hits. That's really the only way, because if a club hits and he jams all in, and I have the ace of clubs in my hand, after he check raised the flop, after defending the blind, he kind of has a flush. You know what I'm saying? So I think we can get away from it if a club comes off. The straights are going to get us, right? If he has 5-6 of clubs and the 4 comes off, he's just going to get me. That's all there is to it. Deuce hits the river. There's better cards, but honestly, they're few and far between. He would have to have exactly the 4-5 of clubs, really, to play the hand this way and beat me. So obviously we're not folding. He does go ahead and jam all in. He only has a 1-to-1 stack to pot ratio. In game, I snap called it. Already explaining all that on the turn. And he did have a combo. He had a better combo than I thought he did. He had a pair and a flush draw, which this I'm actually doing better than against, on the flop than the 4-5 of clubs. So it was very interesting. And then when the ace hits the turn, there's just no reason to get the money in there because we're just going to have to fade the river. And you see, when he misses, he's just going to jam. Like, I don't even know what you're supposed to be representing here. I mean, Jack 7 is really the only 2 pairs, so unless you have exactly a set, you don't beat me. But why would you ever check a set on the turn here with this heavy draw board, and I've already given you action? You would just get it in, especially when the ace comes off. That's really good for my hand. Like, why would you wait for a club to come off to, like, kill your action? So this is one of the few hands that makes sense in this scenario, and this is just a big blind special where he got screwed. Okay, 8-10 suited. Decided to go ahead and raise. This is one where I was looking to get the money in, and I like these hands. We did get 3-bet minimum by a big stack. He just wanted to ISO me or maybe race, I think. It could have been a misclick. Flop comes off 3-4-9. I check. He bets uber small. This is, again, about a quarter of the pot. I decide to go ahead and check raise, and the player folds. And this is one where you see, even though my stack was so short, he let me know how weak he was by what he bet, so it's just an easy check raise. Aces. We make a standard 3-bet. We have 100 blinds here. It's going to be very hard to get it in. So, all monotone flop, and this player checks. I decide to go ahead and bet 2/3 pot. Pretty standard. I'm protecting my hand versus the spade draw. He does check raise me, and I feel like this is a draw most of the time. I decide to go ahead and call it for 2 reasons. 1, I don't want to lose the fish. 2, if a spade misses, thank you, babe. If a spade misses, he's going to overplay the turn, and I'm going to be very safe getting the money in. So I don't want to get it all in on this flop. Like, what if he has, like, you know, ace of spades, 10 of clubs, or something like, you know what I'm saying? Like, a hand that has great equity against me, where I'm not 70-30, I'm more like, you know, 60-40, you know, or 50-50. So calling here is kind of not ideal, but because of the draw nature of the board and the player's tendency, I decided just to call to see the turn and go from there. But I said in game I'm not folding. Jack on the turn is not a great card because it does complete some draws that get there. Queen 10, you know, with the Queen of Spades. I guess that's it. Like, but 10 Jack, you know, now isn't going anywhere, obviously, so it can be good for that. At this point, though, the player bets 28 blinds, which this is improper. He's doing this to look stronger. Here's the thing. If he just jams all in, he has less than a 1-to-1 stack to pot ratio. My call becomes very easy if he does that, right? All I have to do is look at what's in the pot. When I'm getting paid, does my hand hold up often enough? Cool. Players do dumb, fancy shit like this when they're trying to look stronger. He's trying to tell me that if he had a flush, this is what he would do. I don't buy it. Because if you had a flush, you got that action on the flop. Unless you have exactly the ace of spades flush, you're not doing this. Because this move is trying to look stronger. In fact, it looks weaker. So I went ahead and jammed it. He thought about it for a super long time and then called. And it's hilarious when the river comes off. He shows Jack 10 with the Jack of Spades. So he had the open-ended straight draw on the flop, which is a huge mistake to check raise that. Huge mistake, because you saw he got it in on the turn, and if we show you, even with all his crazy draws versus our actual hand, he's still only 43%. So when he bets anything here, I'm only jamming in. He actually thought about this for over a minute before calling. It's hilarious. And I know I ended up losing the hand, but this is one where our opponent did everything wrong. Like on this flop, there's 18 blinds in this flop after I 3-bet, right? He checks and I bet pretty big. He can call here, still have 63 blinds left, and then make a move on the turn, and that might actually work. Like if he had just called on this turn, had 63 blinds left, and then we went to the turn, now there's only 43 in the pot, and he has 63, so the stack and pot kind of switches. If he had checked here and I bet again, and let's say I bet, you know, big, let's say I bet 40, well, he's only got 65, so I guess I'm calling. But if I bet semi-standard, he could figure it out. But he could also just straight jam the turn. And now it's kind of like, what am I up against? Like, if you straight rip this turn for 60 blinds into 45 blinds, honestly, with aces, I'm probably calling. But it's a very hard call with just the ace of spades, right? Which... If I had raised you if I had 3-bet you pre-flop with the ace-king offsuit, led the flop, and then you check raised it and I just called, it's very conceivable I could have just the ace of spades. Then on the turn, you just rip 63 blinds into, or 65 blinds into 43 blinds in my face, and I have the ace king with just the ace of spades. That's kind of a strong play. I can't call. Like, I absolutely can't call because your hand looks like a flush. This doesn't look like a flush at all. This didn't even look like a set, and it wasn't. He just got lucky, you know? So he did everything wrong, and through no fault of his own, he won the pot. But I wouldn't take back anything I play about. I think it's very good. Maybe I could have raised a little bit bigger pre-flop, but a player is going to call you with, because a player who's going to call you with 10-jack offsuit for that big 3-bet, he's going to call you for more. So in that exact instance, if I'd known that about the player, I probably would have made it 13 or 14 pre-flop. But in the end, it doesn't matter. The money's all going in on the turn, just because he's playing poorly. We see a raise. I decided to 3-bet from the cutoff. This is something I haven't been doing enough, which is 3-betting the middle pairs. I've been getting great results. I think it's a good idea. Plus, I do have a stack where if I got jammed on right now, I would absolutely call it. We see a call here, cold call from the button, and the short stack jams. Now that's good for the short stack because he's going to use my stack to leverage. It comes back to me. I go ahead and rejam, and the button folds. And this is why you never want to do this. Raise, 3-bet, you cannot cold call, especially when you only have 47 blinds. He knows on this flop, let's go back. He knows on this flop, after I make it 7.38, right? His natural 4-bet would be too much. His natural 4-bet would be about half his chips. So he knows the move is just to jam. So what's calling here? Just pairs. And it's usually pairs, you know, in the middle range. So 9s on down. You know, it could be even 10s on down. In that case, you know, there's really no reason to do anything. Now, when this player reopens the betting, it comes back to me and I jam. Now this player folds 29 blinds. He folds into a pot of, what is this, 36, 37, 39, 40, 56, 63. So all he has to do to justify a call here is figure out if his hand is going to be good 25% of the time, is going to have the equity range. So if he has two big cards like ace-queen, here he can call, but he probably should have jammed that pre-flop. Ace-queen suited in this scenario might call because you don't want to get blown off the hand, but then when this happens, you cannot fold it, so I could see that happening. Pocket jacks probably should have just jammed pre-flop, but pocket jack should never fold now. So it's kind of sticky for him. This is why you never cold 3-bet, especially on the button, or cold call a 3-bet, especially on the button. It's just bad, especially when you have players behind you who could jam in. And, you know, pocket 7s, man. So we ended up getting into a fantastic situation. This player only had 16 blinds, and there was an extra 9 blinds in this pot because of the way I played it. 3-betting that just truly disguised the strength of my hand and kept this player from 3-betting himself, you know, and making a pretty big mistake. 8-6 suited. I go ahead and raise in the cutoff. Get called in the small blind. Make an 8. This is a fun hand. Now I should have all the aces in my range, right? Player is short. He bets one big blind at it. This move is dumb. This move is usually a weak-ass ace, like ace-deuce, or it's a draw. Most of the time it's a draw. This is called, Dusty Schmidt invented this move playing online. He called it checking with a chip. What would happen is there would be a 200 big blind pot on the river, and he would have bet all this money, and they still have like 300 blinds behind, out of position, and he was the aggressor. He would just put one blind into the pot. He would just check the person with a chip, because they would see that bet and go, what the fuck was that? And most of the time, his opponents would think, oh, he misclicked. He misclicked. I get to show down for cheap. So they would just call the one big blind, and he wouldn't have to face a real bet on the river with a marginal hand. You know, there's a lot of hands where you check, raise, flop, bet, turn, and the river comes off, and it's super bad for you, like some draw got there. And if you just bet one big blind, if you get raised, yes, you're folding. But if you check it, your opponent's going to bet all his bluffs too. So checking with the chip was a valuable move. People have abused that move so much they don't understand what they're doing. This is a person who's trying to get through the board on a cheap showdown, usually with a draw. We don't allow that. So I go ahead and raise right there. This isn't huge, but it's big enough in relation to his stack. He calls. The turn comes off a 9. He bets 4 big blinds now. Now here's the thing. You have 15.75 blinds. There's 16 in the pot. You have been check raised on the flop. You have a 9 in your hand. Do you want to get the money in? Yes. If you wanted to get the money in, wouldn't you just either check or jam it? Because I should have an ace a lot. And if I have an ace, I'm not folding it if you jam. This is never a 9. This is the same draw. This is a player who is weak, and not only that, they are cheap. They're taking one buy-in into a tournament and not understanding the dynamic of re-entry. So this is absolutely not what you do. I decided to ship it in his face because I know he's on the draw. He does call. The river comes off a jack. Not great for my purposes, but the man had queen 7. He was completely bluffing with his muffin, and when I jammed it on the turn, he called it because it was an fuck it, I'd rather just be out of the tournament scenario. And to his credit, he had 3 outs. But I bet it really shocked him when I had the 8-6. It was a really nice hand, and I'm glad that I didn't let the board influence me versus what this player was doing. This player was telling me he didn't have anything. He didn't even have what I gave him credit for, which was a draw like 6, 7, or 10 jack. He actually had blockers to the draws, which is hilarious. When you have a 7 in your hand, it's less likely your opponent's on the draw because I can't have 6, 7. When you have a queen in your hand, it's less likely I have queen 10. You know what I'm saying? So he's actually taking one of the worst bluffing spots. So this seems like really insane to do, but I had absolutely no worries in my head yesterday playing this hand. All I knew I'd have to do was fade the river, and at that point, I didn't have much to worry about. So we get called in a small blind. Player checks. I decide just to check it because my ace-king is strong enough most of the time. Player bets 2 big blinds on the turn. This is super small. I feel like if you had a 10 or a 8 or something here, or a draw, you would bet bigger. So to me, this kind of looked like a 4 or nothing. Like it could just be some weird like Jack 9, or not even Jack 9. It could be like Queen Jack, something with overcards and a gut shot. Maybe something as weird as 5, 6, but I feel like this is one where he's just like, all right, you didn't see bet the flop, you must not have anything. So he's just taking a poke, right? This is where it gets interesting. I'm 50-50 versus the deck when that queen hits, right? Because what queens does he ever have? Not many, right? He bets the river, and he bets half pot, and this is that bad bluff size, but it's also bad player's value bet size. Your value bet here should be about 8 big blinds, right? Because you're going to get called at the same frequency as you are 5.5. So if you bet 8 big blinds and you get called 30% of the time with a good hand, you know that's why you want to bet more. If you're going to get called the same frequency and you have the winner, bet more. You know what I'm saying? There's no point in betting less. You're not going to get called at a greater frequency. You're just costing yourself money. There's really no hands here that make sense for him to be betting, except for... No, because Jack 9 doesn't even make sense, because it would bet bigger on the turn. So to me, this is a total bluff 90% of the time. There's one specific hand you can have in this scenario. I guess 2. You could have pocket 4s, right? And want to build a pot a little bit, maybe get a little bit of something, right? Versus my ace-king. Or you can have a queen 10. And I said that in game because that's the only one that checks the flop, bets the turn, and then bets the river. Because if anything other than the queen 10 comes off when you have queen 10, you must think you're beat, right? You can't be confident enough to bet. Even if it comes off a deuce, you're like, why am I getting called? But if a jack, a king, an ace, a 9, unless like another 10 comes off, right? Like there's so many cards that beat you after you've been called on the turn. So this river bet is very specific. And when you're up against a very specific river bet, calling it is never a mistake. If the range of hands that beat you is so small, like pocket 8s, right? Even ace 8 would have bet bigger on the turn. So like any 8 would have bet bigger on the turn. So it has to be a monster. And there's not a lot of monsters here. Jack nine's not there because it would bet bigger on the turn. So it's pocket fours, pocket eights, or queen 10 exactly. They're the ones that can bet here, because even king queen, if you were doing something stupid with king queen, you would back off. You would check, because I could definitely have ace queen. I raised preflop. So this is a very specific one. So when it's very specific, I make the hero call, and he had exactly queen 10. And it was so funny because I said it in game. Unless he has exactly queen 10, I think this is a bluff. And, you know, I'm correct. So that's fine. Sometimes the math just, doesn't fail you, but you're just up against the low percentage scenario, which is fine. That's going to happen. King 10 suited. We see a raise. This is funny. This was on the stone bubble. I'm gonna go back. I clicked through it too quickly. So this is the stone bubble, right? This player in first position has 5.3 blinds. He makes it 3 big blinds to go. I think we were actually 2 away from the money. So this player bets 3 big blinds, and everybody folds, right? Because he's only got 5 blinds. He should be willing to get it all in. The truth of the matter is here, I just went ahead and jammed the king 10 because it's good enough. Why not put them all in? This player, I don't want to stick around the pot, so unless he has a monster, he won't. Honestly, he's folding ace queen here because we're so close to the cash. And this player ended up folding it because we were so close to the cash with 2.3 blinds left going into the big blind. So he was so desperate to cash. So this is a huge... He could have just folded through the blinds and been better off. He did end up cashing because he got lucky when he got all in. But it's hilarious that he folded there. So you got to understand tournament dynamic. Ace-king offsuit, we see a raise. We go ahead and 3-bet again. I'm sure enough that this small 3-bet is intended to get the player to jam all in on me. Because if I 3-bet to a standard 3-bet, I'm going to be making it 9 or 10 blinds. But this is perfect enough for our purposes. I want to get committed to the pot. Player calls, comes off queen, queen 10. Not ideal for me. He can have a lot of queens. I decided to check back because of my ace-king's intrinsic value. It's going to win a lot on its own. But we make a straight on the turn, and we have the royal draw. How do you like that? Open-ended royal flush straight draw, or straight flush royal draw. Player bets half pot. This means almost nothing. In game, I was like, I'm so far ahead here, it's ridiculous. And I even have a redraw. Like, what hands beat me here? Specifically, queen, jack, queen 10. But he's going to have king, queen a lot. He's going to have ace, queen a lot. You know what I'm saying? Like, there's not a lot of hands here. And he's betting enough to get me in. I don't see a reason to raise here because I want him to jam. If he's possibly leveraging my stack with this smaller than standard bet on the turn, like if you had a queen on this turn, you'd probably commit here. But how can you commit when the jack comes off? Can't I have ace-king a lot? So he bets. I see no reason to raise. The king of clubs hits the turn, and he checks. And when he checks here, this is a mistake a lot of players make, and I used to make this one too up until a couple years ago. Why would I check here? Why would I check here? Right? What beats me? Queen 10, queen jack, sixes, jacks, tens, queens. That's it. Right? And the ace of clubs specifically. That's all. Those hands are not in this pot. Those hands are literally never in this pot because the betting would have been different. You know, the flop would have been bet differently. The turn would have been bet differently. These hands are not in this pot. So when he checks, I have the nuts here. This is the conceivable nuts, but this is beyond the conceivable nuts or the effective nuts. So this is a jam all day. And you better believe you're getting called by somebody you can beat. People will say, well, what can call you? First and foremost, what can call you when you bet into this board and say, I would never call anything there? What can call you? A bad player. That's first and foremost what can call you. Okay? Not everybody's perfect. People don't study like you. People don't know. So give a bad player a chance to play bad. Don't make them play perfect by checking. So, and also, what can call me? It's rough. Because the jack and the 10 are on the board, there's not a lot of flushes. There's only, the 9 high flush. I really don't see what you call here with that I lose to, or that I beat. Like, I don't see conceivably what you're supposed to call here with, unless you think I'm on a pure bluff. And I think this is one of the worst boards I've ever seen to be making a pure bluff, especially when you only have a half to one stack to pot ratio. I only have half the pot. This bluff should not work at all. Like, you only have to be right here 25% of the time to make this call. That's it. So he does call, and Queen 9, just dead, no club in his hand. You know what I'm saying? Now, if he had gotten in the turn, I could see it, right? If he had bet bigger, like if we're on the turn, I have 26 blinds. If he just decides to shove all in on me, I can only call him with a flush, a better queen, or ace king specifically. It's not a lot of combinations when you have queen 9. And even if I have king queen, an 8 can come off, you can win. A 9 can come off, you can win. You know, So this is the worst bet of the day right there. But you see, he wasn't able to fold. Let me get 2.5 with the ace 5 of hearts. Just tuned in. Did he bet the flop? Check it out. I 3-bet. He checks the flop out of position. And I checked because of my hand's value. You can see versus the deck, I'm still 70% to win. But if I bet here and get raised, I have to fold, right? We check, make the jack on the turn. He bets half pot. We just call. He checks the river. We jam. Boom. That's how the hand went down. So what do we think, Jack? Or Mad Cow? What do we think? Do we understand that? Does it make sense what he's doing, do you think? Odd call by him, right? Like, what can you beat? I mean, you could beat a pure bluff, but even in this scenario, what pure bluffs do I have? Pocket 9s? Okay, but you have a 9 in your hand. That means if I have pocket 9s, a lot of those combinations beat you because I have the 9 of clubs. You know, pocket 8s is the same problem. Pocket 7s is the same problem. Like, what do you beat? Like, it's just too much. There's just too many combinations of hands that beat you. You have to win 25% of the time, and you're not going to here based on that bet. See a call from the small blind. I have 21 blinds. There's 6 in the pot. I obviously want to get it in. This is very late in the tournament. You can see the chip average on the table is 490,000. I have 343. This one player has me covered. We are very deep in this tournament. I decided to go ahead and just bet super small standard continuation bet. My feeling is I'm invulnerable. I'm playing this hand like it's jokers. So, especially versus the small blind, unless he has exactly a set, I'm ahead. You know what I'm saying? He could have a better ace, I guess. Now, he raises. My feeling was we can get the money in. When he check raises me on this board, he should have a lot of draws. I would think 5-6 would be the most common, but, and in game, I said it, he can definitely have a worse flush draw. Definitely. I feel like he never has an ace here because any ace that plays pre-flop, the only ones he has that beat me are ace 7 and ace 4, and it has to be the suited combination. There's not enough of those left. If he has ace queen, ace jack, things like that, he's going to jam. You know what I'm saying? So this is usually another draw because even the random 7-4 doesn't defend at this stage of the tournament. Plus, the big blind has a 12 big blind stack. He could just jam in, and this guy knows that, and the betting would be reopened. So we call it, make the flush on the turn. That's great, but he had exactly the counterfeited flush draw. So he was drawing dead, pretty much. I mean, I guess he could have gone jack-jack or jack-queen, but they would have to been, you know, a combination of the last 2 sixes or 6 cards of that in the deck. Kind of unlikely. So, yeah, interesting. It's just one of those ones where it was good to figure out that's what was going on. I had almost no fear of 2-pair here. We raise on the button, get called. Interesting spot here. So, again, same tournament, super deep, right? I'm opening. This player is short. He's defending with 12 blinds. Probably not a great idea to do unless you have a monster. Flop comes off jack, jack, deuce. I decided to go ahead and check it back because what would I do with a jack here? I would check it, right? Bad players would check the jack here most of the time. He decides to bet 1/4 pot on the turn. To me, this is nothing. This is that same nothing bet. You see people betting a quarter pot. It kind of doesn't mean anything, right? He can have a jack on his stack for sure, but he's going to have to bet the river. King comes off, usually great for my range, right? So he checks. And the debate here was, do I need to bet? I don't think so. Because if he has a king, he's not going to fold, right? If he has a jack, he would just get the money in. There's a perfect 1-to-1 almost stack to pot ratio. If he has a deuce, I don't think he's going to hero call me, right? The check eliminated a jack. Exactly. He's not checking a jack on the river. If he's betting small to get paid by something, like please give me a call, he's going to bet a third pot on the river and look like he's trying to get a showdown, with a jack. And it entices me to bluff. It's actually a good move. So, and I wasn't really worried about him having a king, but then again, if he has a king, he may not bet it because he may really feel like I have a jack, or he may now allow me to bluff, right? Because if he has king jack, or if he has king 10 or something, it's kind of unlikely that I have a king and played the hand this way unless I have exactly ace king. So he's not going to fold anyway. The only thing that I was worried about was that he may have a 6. He could have a hand like 6-7, right? And it could have even been a draw, like 6-7 of hearts, and he just wanted to get to the river, and when it missed, then he gave up. So he gives up, and then I should bet, right? But I think there's just more combinations of situations in this scenario where if I bet, I'm getting called by a better hand. So this is one where I decided to just check it. There really isn't much value play here. And our friend had queen 10. He had a pure bluff. He missed it all. And, I think we got the most value out of this hand we could safely. Could I have bluffed the flop? Sure. I could have c-bet the flop every time. But then again, sometimes I'm going to get floated. And I open myself up to getting bluffed. Like if I c-bet the flop for a third pot, right? Like 2-point-something blinds, and he calls it, and the turn comes off the 6 of spades, and he checks. Can I really bet? Like, because he only has like 8 or 9 blinds left with that betting structure. He only has 9 blinds left, and there's like 10 in the pot. Can I bluff him? Like, don't I have to just put them all in? So because of his small stack, this was the better way to play it. And I think I did really well here, to profit 100,000 chips on that pot. Pocket trays. This was very late. Now you can see the stack average is a mill ball. I had a million. I was actually doing very well, and then my computer crashed, or not the computer crashed, but the browser went down. So ACR crashed and all like that, and I had to restart the computer, which sucks. And I lost some blinds. I lost one small pot for like 100,000, 2 hands before this, and I marked this hand because I wanted to go over it and see how I'm doing. Now, we ended up going out here in 22nd place no, it was less than that. It was like 17th place, I forget, something like that. We were down to 2 tables, but we weren't near the final table bubble, right? So I have 3 pocket 3s and 20 blinds. I wanted to look this one up on pokercoaching.com. I think it's a jam because of the exact dynamic, but I may have erred on the side of aggression here. You can see this player, I had quite a few hands on him. He's opening 40% of hands. He is one of the bigger stacks. So when this guy folds, he should be raising a lot because there's many medium stacks behind. Yeah, this guy's a jam stack, but he's proven to be fairly tight. So I wanted to look this one up. And let's go to the tools section. 20 big blinds in the cutoff facing a raise with pocket 3s. I think it's kind of aggressive, but I think it's okay because we're trying to get the fold mostly. Cutoff versus a raise. The other opponent's position is the hijack. Pocket 3s. It's a fold. But But at the same time, this is one where my dynamic is that I'm going for the fold, right? I'm trying to get the fold because he really can't call me without a good hand here. And this is a situation where somebody's not going to call me with ace jack or king queen or, pocket fives, pocket sixes. Like, there's a lot of folds here. Like, he's got 40 big blinds. Let's look at it from his perspective. He's got 40 big blinds. He's in the hijack. He's raising first in. This is what his range looks like. So you know what? Let's go a step further. Let's go to Equilab and bring it up. Let's go ahead and enter this in Equilab. King 4 suited, Queen 7 suited, Jack 7, 10 7. Like, these are all the hands he's supposed to be opening. 9 7 9 8 9 9. King 9, Ace 9, Ace 8, all the pairs. Yeah, that's it right there. So we apply this to Equilab, and let's see exactly how our range does against this. So, or our actual hand does against this, right? So move this over. What's my actual hand? 3 of diamonds, 3 of hearts. 3 of diamonds, 3 of hearts. What's... Okay, it's 50-50. Okay, and when it's 50-50 versus this range, I think I'm okay with the jam. Because this is half his stack. Okay, here's the thing to remember. We're down to less than two tables or less, right? Or actually, it's 8-handed, so we're at like 1,800 players. Yeah, so he's got 1.4 million, right? In a 50-50 scenario, my stack plays bigger. I know this is borderline, but you can see the jamming range that I had 56% of the time, right? Check it out. Cutoff versus the raise. Come on. From the other opponent's position, the hijack. It's not my mouse, it's my hand. I'm cramping. It's an all-in at 4-4, 50% of the time. 5s, 6s, 7s is a straight jam. So I'm definitely overly aggressive because it's supposed to be a fold, but I think because he should not be racing for 20 big blinds for half his stack at this point, I think the jam is okay. I don't know if it's great. I think, we went out 17th. The next pay jump was at 15. I think there must have been like 21 or 22 players left, right? Because there's 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 of us on this table. So there must be between 21 and 23 players. So at this point, you're only racing the top end of your range. And this player, like I said, was opening 40% of hands. I think the jam is fine because that's a perfect GTO range. His actual range probably looks much different. His actual opening range, since he was opening every hand, probably includes shit like this. His opening range probably looks more like that. And if we apply that and evaluate it, we're a little better off. We're closer to 50-50. We're better off by 2%. But we get more folds from the jam. So I've made peace with this. I won't say it's the right move, but I will say I think at the time it was best. It's not perfect, but I think it's fine. And in the end, it was a race. And if I won it, now I'm the guy with 1.4 million, and I have a good chance to move on. Having 70% of the chip average at this point is, getting iffy. So I think we had a lot of fold equity. I think we just happened to run into the top of his range. I think he's going to fold a lot of hands that beat us on this race. He's going to, but just the ace king is one of the ones that's there. So I wanted to run the numbers on it. I'm only going to say I made peace with that decision. I don't know if it's right or wrong. perfect. I know it's not perfect GTO, but I think with an adjustment, I think it's a good play, and I think it has its time and place, and I think yesterday was the time and place for it. I don't want to make it sound like I'm justifying it, but I think my move is valid. I think this is one that nobody could say definitively I was wrong. Because you can't just go by perfect GTO, especially when you're down to that few players. And that's one of those ones where you have to take the chance to get in the tournament, and build chips or double up. So if he had shown me Ace King, like if he had just, like if we were live and he raised and just flashed me the Ace King, I'd be like, okay, I'm all in. Because it's 50-50, and I'll take a 50-50 at that point. Because I have more to win than he should be willing to lose. So, fun times. How long have I been on? It only took us like an hour. Cool. Let's do some of the tournament masterclass. Let's pick it up. Let's see. Minimum defense frequency. This is a fun topic. I love this topic. This is one of the first pieces of poker theory that I studied that changed the way that I think about poker. Not in this course, but when I heard about minimum defense frequency, it was years ago. And I remember thinking, what does that mean? And it was the concept of how often you should continue to make your bets and calls valid. So it was a very interesting concept to me, and it allowed me to get into that stuff. And this was as, this was like in 2004 when people were just starting to talk about combinatrix and stuff like that. And when I heard the concept of minimum defense frequency, it allowed me to do math to figure out that I was folding too much, which to me was an amazing answer. So let's do it.
Before we move forward discussing more pre-flop strategies, let's discuss the idea of minimum defense frequency. The minimum defense frequency is the mathematical percentage of your entire range that you have to defend, either by calling or re-raising, to keep your opponent from blindly profiting using pure aggression. And this is essentially how often you have to defend to make sure your opponent does just not completely run you over by betting. Some of the easiest players in the world to beat are the players who just fold unless they have a good hand. And you don't want to be those players. The formula for minimum defense frequency is 1 minus your opponent's bet divided by your opponent's bet plus whatever else is in the pot. And whatever else is in the pot includes the blinds, the antes, previous raises, etc. But I'll give you some examples in just the future to make that more clear. Minimum defense frequency is how often you should defend at least. Very often, you should be defending more than the minimum defense frequency. Minimum defense frequency does apply almost always before the flop and on the river. It does not necessarily apply on the flop and the turn, but whenever we get to the post-flop section of this masterclass, I will be explaining how to use it there. But for now, we're just going to be discussing.
Very quickly, on the river and the flop, the reason why it applies pre-flop and the river, the start and the end of the hand. So you don't know what's going to come on the board, but when you have this hand, how often should you defend it? That's what we're discussing. On the river, you're facing a bet, and you're not considering a raise. You're trying to decide how often you should call. You already know all the cards. Your information is complete with the value of your hand. Now you have to decide how often did you have to call a raise to keep from being bluffed too often. So they're finite decisions based on information that you have at that time. You're basing the first one on your cards and the last one on all the cards.
Pre-flop. So let's take a common situation where you raise to 3 big blinds from under the gun +1, and the low jack 3-bets you to 10 big blinds. Okay? Well, let's figure out minimum defense frequency. Here we have 1 minus the opponent's bet plus the pot. Well, the opponent's bet plus the rest of the pot, which is your raise, the small blind, the big blind, and the ante. Here I have small blind, big blind, ante. Take a second, fill in these numbers.
So I'm gonna break this down very slowly because this math can get very muddled. You'll see throughout the course, Jonathan Little himself will get muddled in the math and go, wait, I just screwed it up. So this is just the formulaic way to do this. You're going to get a sense of this with all these hands after you do this thousands of times. You're not going to have to do this math. But you raised to 3 big blinds, under the gun +1, the low jack, 3 bets, 10 big blinds. So it's 1 minus. Now let's do the parentheses first. Your opponent's bet plus your raise plus the small blind and big blind, because all the money in the pot is what counts, right? So your opponent's bet is 10 big blinds plus your raise, 3 big blinds. That's already in the pot. The small blind, big blind, and ante is about 2.5 blinds. One for the small blind, one for the ante, or one for the ante. I'm sorry, one for the big blind, one for the ante, and one for the small blind. 2.5. So 15.5. And then, so that's the parentheses number. You're using that to divide your opponent's bet subtracted from 1. Okay, so 15.5. Okay, so let's just bring up another calculator so we can make it easy. So now the full equation is 1 minus your opponent's bet, which is 10, right? Full bet, minus divided by this number, all the other money in the pot, right? 15.5. 58%, right? Negative 58, you multiply it by, it's 58%. That's what we're looking at. So 58% of the time you should be defending versus this raise, if I didn't get muddled in the math myself.
Here they are. We have 1 minus the opponent's bet, which is 10 big blinds, divided by the opponent's bet, which is 10 big blinds, plus the your raise, because that's already in the pot.
1 minus your opponent's bet, divided by all the money on the pot. Your raise, his raise, the blinds and antes. All the money that you see on the table. Okay? That's the number. Just simplify it in your head.
Plus the small blind, big blind ante. That comes out to 35%. So,
wait a minute,
in this scenario, if your opponent's...
Wait a minute. 1 minus 10 is 9. Right? Negative 9. Negative 9 divided by 15.5. What? Oh, I see what he's doing. It's not 1... Okay, sorry. It's the opponent's bet divided by 15.5. 1 minus that number. Oh, I'm an idiot. Oh, I just muddled the math in my own head. So, yeah. So, it's this whole thing subtracted from 1. See, this is dumb to me. That extra step is dumb. I learned it by adding up all the money on the table and dividing the opponent's bet by it, right? So if all the money on the table is 15.5, the opponent's bet is 10. You divide that by 15.5. You end up with 64%. I guess the subtraction from 1 is the minimum defense frequency is 35%, because we get 65% with this equation. So, all right, that makes sense. But I just learned it to take this, and then it's what's left from 100. So, yeah, I guess that makes sense.
Bluffing with literally any 2 cards, this bet would have to force you to fold at least 65% of the time to make an immediate profit, which means you need to call more than 35% of the time to prevent your opponent from exploitatively overbluffing. And if you look at the optimal strategy here, you'll see that in this scenario, you should do something like this, where you are calling or re-raising the 3-bet at least about 55% of the time, which is more than 35% of the time. And as you see in this scenario, you're actually defending some hands that are not very, very premium. Notice if you only stuck around here with something like aces, kings, queens, and ace-king, well, now you'd be folding way too often. This is what a lot of the weakest players do very wrong, is they'll raise with a reasonable range before the flop, but then only defend with the absolute nuts, and that results in their opponents just running them over to the point that, yeah, they're going to lose some money when they run into aces, kings, queens, and ace-king, but they win the initial raise, the blinds, and the ante so often to the point that it more than makes up for their potential losses. So, in general, especially as your opponents play well, as they play aggressively, you want to strive to over defend. And that's because when your opponents are bluffing, they don't actually have 0% equity. They still win some portion of the time, even with their bluffs. Like if you raise and they 3-bet you with the ace-5 offsuit, and you stick around with ace-10 suited, they actually still win the pot some portion of the time, right? So you always want to make sure you are over-defending when at all possible. Also, every hand in your continuing range needs to at least realize your pot odds. So what I mean by this is, in this scenario, whenever someone raises and we do call, like take a look at this example here, right? All of these hands are going to need to realize at least 30-ish% equity against our opponent's range based on our pot odds. And you're going to find that if you do structure your range as well, and if you follow the charts that I have laid out for you, this is just going to naturally fall in place. What happens to a lot of people is they'll raise a hand like ace-8 offsuit, right? And then someone will 3-bet, and then they'll call. But it turns out the ace-8 offsuit does really poorly. It's not going to realize its pot odds. This is kind of a confusing concept, but you're going to find that if you do just stick to the fundamentally sound charts that we have laid out for you, you are going to be perfectly fine. It is worth noting that the dominated hands will under-realize their equity, which is why you see hands like that ace-8 offsuit folding. Also, when you're out of position, you will under-realize your equity, which is why, as we discussed earlier, when you are out of position, you typically want to be 4-betting more than you are calling. Whereas when you're in position, you're going to realize your equity decently well, so that allows you to call with a wider range. Let's take a look at another example. You raise to 2.75 big blinds from the hijack seat, and the big blind 3-bets to 12 big blinds. Okay, take a second.
All right, let's see if I can do it right this time. So, the big blind raised 12 big blinds. So his bet, I should just use the goddamn number pad. Hang on. His bet's 12 big blinds plus my 2.75 plus the blinds and antes, which is 2.5, equals 16.95. Okay? His bet is 12, so we're going to divide 12 divided by 16.95. Enter. Is that right? His bet's 12, right? Oh, god damn it, I'm getting the repeating number. That's what the problem is. My keyboard gets sticky. 12 divided by 16.95. Why is it coming out as a whole number? It should be a negative number. Oh well. So it's -1, so I'm going to go plus 1 to the negative. 29% is our minimum defense frequency. That's wrong. The big blind, no, that's wrong. Because his bet absorbed the blind. So when he 3-bets to 12 from the big blind, this is 1 less. Right? His bet is 12 plus my 275 plus the small blind plus the ante plus nothing. 12, 1475, 1525, 1625. Because his bet absorbed the big blind. Right? Yeah. 12, 1475, 1520, 1625. 73 plus 1 to the negative. 26% defense frequency.
Figure out the minimum defense frequency here. Well, in this scenario...
Wait a goddamn minute. Okay, you just made this way too complicated, Jonathan. Like, he's using the... I'm going to have to go through this when I've got more caffeine in me because my brain is not firing correctly. So his... It's not his bet, it's his raise that counts. This is getting muddled now. This is getting very muddled. I don't like the way this example is done because it subtracted the blind from his raise. All right, so that's what we're doing. So it's 11 plus 2.75 plus the 2.5. It's still 1625, but the problem is the division's wrong. So We're going to go 11 divided by 16.25 is 67 plus 1 to the negative. Yeah, 32% defense frequency. So we don't count the blind in his raise. So even though his raise is to 12, we're counting it as 11 because he's in the blind.
Your opponent's bet is 11 plus your opponent's bet plus your initial raise plus the small blind plus the big blind plus the ante. Maybe saying 11 though. Why is this 11? Well, this is 11 because your opponent already had one big blind in the pot. So your opponent's actually only risking 11 more, right? So minimum defense frequency here is 32%. And if your opponent was bluffing with literally any 2 cards, this would need to make you fold at least 68% of the time to make an immediate profit. So you have to call more than 32% of the time. And as you see in this scenario, you are playing something like 55% of hands, which is way more than the minimum defense frequency. Now, so far, we've been discussing mainly when you're playing against someone who plays reasonably well. But you should always make sure you are adjusting to whatever your specific opponent does incorrectly. If your opponent's range is tight, if you raise and they're only 3-betting you with pocket aces, well, you can defend way tighter. Minimum defense frequency does not apply. If your opponents are playing very, very wide range, if they're 3-betting you with all sorts of stuff, well, then you should actually be defending even more than the minimum defense frequency. This number is not like a set-in-stone number that you must blindly adhere to, but it's a guide that will let you know roughly what percentage of your hands you need to stick around with at least. Remember, it's the minimum defense frequency, not the maximum defense frequency, right? It's also worth noting that the minimum defense frequency is divided among all players remaining in the pot. And what I mean by that is if, let's say, the under-the-gun player raises, and then you are in second position, you may do the math right there and think, okay, minimum defense frequency is whatever it is. Let's say it's 40%. You may think that you need to defend with 40% of your hands, but that's not true. That 40% is actually divided by all players remaining at the table. This also applies after the flop. If someone makes a continuation bet on the flop, like they raise before the flop, 5 people call, flop comes and they make a bet. In that scenario, minimum defense frequency may be, let's say, 50%, but each player does not have to defend 50%. They have to defend, like let's say there's 5 players in the pot, they have to defend roughly 1/5 of 50%, which is 10%, which is not all that often. So if there are a lot of players in the pot, you really don't have to be defending nearly as often. If you are the only player in the pot, though, you do need to stick around quite often, and that's going to lead to some situations that may make you uncomfortable. But throughout this masterclass, I'm going to be giving you good, solid information to make those uncomfortable spots feel much more comfortable.
This is a rough one. It's very heady, and it's way too early for me right now. But we're probably going to go through this one again tomorrow because I feel like I was off, so we'll see. Everyone folds to the player in the small blind who raises to 4.5. What is your minimum defense frequency in the big blind? Well, okay, we got an easy one here. Okay. So, player in the small blind raises to 4.5. So, he's risking 4, not 4.5, because apparently his bet is already in there. So, his bet is going to be 4 plus the blinds and antes. 2.5. Okay? So we're going to divide 4 divided by 6.5, that total out there, plus the 1 to the negative. 38%. Looks right to me. All right? I should have gotten that right. All right. Your opponent's bet divided by, the razor. So it's 4, not 4.5, because his half big blind was already out there. All right. Feel better about that. Here we go. You raise 2.75 from middle position. The big blind 3-bets to 10 big blinds. Everyone folds around to you. What is your minimum defense frequency? Okay, well, his risk, he's in the blind, so it's what he's risking because you don't absorb the big blind. All right, got to keep saying that. He's in the big blind, so his risk is 9 plus my 2.75 plus the blinds and antes equals 14.25. So we divide his risk, 9 divided by 14.25, equals 63%. We'll just do minus 1. 36%, right? Oh, almost 37%. So that's it. Boom. All right. Now we're getting it. Now we're feeling good. All right. All right. 2.75 middle position, and the big blind 3-bets to 6.5. Everyone falls to you. What is your raise? Well, that's the same question. So the big blind's risk is 525, so 5.25 plus my bet, 2.75 plus the blinds and antes, 2.5 equals 10.5. So we're going to divide his risk by that. So his risk is, wait a minute, I might have done it wrong. Hold on. 5.25 plus 2.75 plus 2.5. Right, 10.5. Okay, so his risk is 5.25 divided by 10.5 equals 50% minus 1. 50% defense frequency. Boom! All right, now I feel like I got it grasped. Doing the math problems helps because it makes it just very clear, and I can say it the way I need to say it. So it's his risk, not his bet, because his blind money is already in there. All right, we're going to mark this as complete. And
now let's discuss when there are limpers before the action gets to you. And just to be very clear, a limper is someone who just...
I'm going to go back to the courses. And we may do that one again, might not. I'm probably just going to go through it off stream because it's kind of boring to do it on stream again. Facing limpers with greater than 60 big blinds. So you have 60 big blinds or greater effective stack and facing limpers. Big topic. I think we should get into that tomorrow, especially since I need some caffeine and some breakfast. So cool. I don't know if today is a play day. I have a few things to get done. I would very much like to play today, but we will see. I'm not going to host. I'm just going to go ahead and end it. There's a lot of people playing. There's Tonkas out there. Grips is playing, all that kind of stuff. He's doing marbles. DMAC, of course, is still streaming. I'll see you guys later today if I play. If not, tomorrow's stream at noon, and then tomorrow is definitely a play day. But if I play today, might not play tomorrow. We'll see. Either way, have a great day, guys. Thanks for coming out and hanging. I really appreciate you. Have a good day.